If you got your Bible, turn to John chapter 4. We are always trying to figure out how to live life at the level God intended for us to live from heaven toward earth. The easiest thing for us to always do is to live according to the natural mind, according to circumstances, according to past experiences, maybe even according to traditions, or even look around us at other believers or what's happening in the church around us, and we're always making assessments about what's available, what is possible, and whether we know it or not, we've actually made truces and agreements with lesser things. We're not aware of the fact that we've done that. But the reality for us is that because we tend to gravitate towards that which is more discouraging than that which is encouraging, we tend to agree more with defeat and powerlessness and things that have been broken, and we haven't yet seen God do something that would give us evidence that there's hope for something greater. We can tend to settle down and just make a truce, so to speak, with things as they are. And that presents a challenge for us when you're walking with God. Because when Jesus walks into the room where you live, all potential changes. There's something new that we have to embrace. But our ability to embrace that really hinges on a couple of different things. And so here at the river, we're always pressing in to say, how do we move from where we're at into that which is available from heaven? How many know living at a higher level is a good idea? Taking advantage of all that has been bought and paid for by Jesus is a good idea. That there's, we were singing it this morning, there's more. Living on that edge of there's more can be very, very challenging, because it means somebody's got to change, and it's not going to be God, it's going to be us. Somebody's thinking has got to change, and even as Jody said as she opened up this morning, there has to come an intentionality within us to embrace the things that are made available to us. And so the fact is that the greatest things that God is going to do in your life are not things that you're going to learn in a book. It's things that are going to be revealed to you in the moment as you walk with God and as you read His book. And when those things are revealed, we're given opportunity to step up into a greater place. Now, I want us to look at how this plays out in this story in John chapter 4. Here we have the story of Jesus encountering the woman at the well. And so it's Mom's Day, talking about women here. So usually the woman at the well is not seen in a very highly respectable light, and because of the things that are revealed about her life. But what I love about this story is that it describes the process that the Lord is going to take her through from where she's at to where she can go, where she didn't know she could go. And it also reveals to us the heart of Jesus and what's been made available to us and how anxious He is to get it to us. So let's go ahead and start with verse 1 in chapter 4. Therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself was not baptizing, but his disciples were, he left Judea and went away again into Galilee, and he had to pass through Samaria. We can just stop right there. If you know anything about Samaria and Samaritans and its history, Samaria was an area that had been a part of Israel but had fallen away, and it had its own history of judgment, and there had been a resettlement and of people that had come into the area, and even though the Jews had come back, been resettled into Samaria years later. I'm not doing well explaining this, but the end result was that there was so much mixture of Judaism with other religions and other gods and so forth, that Samaria was known as an area where they still believed in Jehovah God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but they were considered to just not be a pure form of that. And so the Jews regarded the Samaritans, those who live in Samaria and of Samaritan origin, they regarded them as defiled, and you just stayed away from the Samaritans, because if you hung out with them, you were going to end up believing the wrong things, and they were not really a covenant people. And they had their own place of worship that they had established, and so the Jews said, we have Jerusalem, we have the temple, this is where all the real worship takes place, and we worship the real God, and you Samaritans are off in La La Land out there, and you're deceiving yourselves. And so they were considered really by the Jews to be unclean, and the Jews didn't want to have anything to do with them. And so for Jesus even to be passing through Samaria was unusual. Jews didn't like to go through there, and so if you were going to be telling like an ethnic joke, if you lived in Jerusalem, you were going to tell an ethnic joke, you would tell a Samaritan joke, kind of like Montanans with their Dakota jokes, or whatever. Shame on us. But anyway, so the Samaritans were just in Samaria were just disdained by the Jews. And so here Jesus is passing through Samaria because it's the shortcut to where he's going. Verse 5, so he came to a city of Samaria called Sychar, which, by the way, means drunken. Probably not from drinking too much water. He came into the city of Samaria near Sychar, and near the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. So you can see that Samaria has some rich heritage in Jewish culture. This is the place, the very land where Jacob himself had given something to his son Joseph. And Jacob's well was there. Whoa, okay. Important place, right? It would be an important place for the Jews. So the Samaritans are all living in this area where Jacob had been, and Jacob had actually dug a well. And so there's some spiritual history for, 1,000+ years of history connected to this area. And that well that Jacob had dug and drunk from was still in that place, and these Samaritans were drawing from this well. And they knew full well what the significance of the well. And you might say, oh well. But that's a deep subject, so. Got to have some humor here today, yeah. And so this is where Jesus is walking into. He's walking into a place where there's this rejected people who are still connected to the promises of God. They're trying to be connected to the promises of God given through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and they're drawing from a well that they know is very significant. It's part of the history of what God was doing in the Old Covenant through the forefathers of the faith. And so these people are living in some kind of spiritual religious connection to this well. And this is the well that Jesus is going to show up at. So Jesus, being wearied from his journey, was sitting thus by the well, and it was about the 6th hour. And there came a woman of Samaria to draw water. And Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Now the implication here is that Jesus he was so weary, he was so tired, and he just didn't want to have to go with them into the city. And I'm sure Jesus was also wanting to avoid crowds and whatever else. And so he's just going to park himself at the well outside of the city. But I believe it's very possible that Jesus also knew this was going to be a place of divine encounter. And so everything Jesus does, he does intentionally, not haphazardly, or it just was an accident that he was too tired and just sat at the well. But here Jesus is. And the disciples have left him. He's all by himself now. They've gone into the city to buy food because they're all hungry and weary. Therefore, the Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask me for a drink, since I am a Samaritan woman?" For the Jews have no dealings with Samaritans, it says in parentheses. And Jesus answered and said to her, now I want you to hear these words, "If you knew the gift of God, and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." Let's repeat that. She's asking, how is it that you, a male, for one, talking to me, a woman, and you being a Jew, are even talking to me, let alone asking to drink from my ladle, or whatever she had to draw water from. You are willing to put your lips on my, and she already knew she was considered to be unclean by the Jews. She's outside, as far as the Jews are concerned. She's outside. She's rejected from the pure access to God. How is it that you, being a man, and you being a Jew, are asking me that you... She understood that it looked like Jesus was lowering himself and potentially going to defile himself and violate his own conscience. And should anybody walk up and see him doing this, he would certainly be chastised. How is it that you are setting yourself up to relate to me in this way, where you actually need something from me, and I would take care of your thirst? And Jesus' response was, "If you knew." If there's something that you knew right now, it would completely flip this entire thing around. If you knew the gift of God, and if you knew who was talking to you right now, asking you for a drink, something would have already happened. You would have come to me and you would have said, give me a drink of living water. And I would have already given it to you. It would have already happened. Now, I want to break that down for us here in a second. Let's just finish reading this. So she said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? You are not greater than our father Jacob, are you? Who gave us the well and drank of it himself and his sons and his cattle." And Jesus answered and said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will thirst again. But whoever drinks of the water that I will give him shall never thirst, for the water that I will give him will become in him a well of water springing up to eternal life. Now, you just try to put yourself in these woman's sandals, if she had some, and she's trying to comprehend, what is he saying to me? What is Jesus describing something that is outside of her thinking, her normal, her way of viewing life, even her way of viewing water, her way of having needs met? Jesus is describing for her something that is from heaven, that is eternal, that is of the Spirit. It starts off talking about physical water with physical thirst, but Jesus is so good at this, he moves everything around to talking about, here's the real issue. Because there's something that Jesus is after with her. And so she's asking him, how do we deal with this water issue? Now she's talking on the physical level because she's saying, well, you don't have anything to draw with, and you don't even have access to water. How can you give me living water? And Jesus is pulling her back out of the physical thoughts. And you need to understand that you and I are so conditioned to thinking according to worldly functioning and how our needs are going to be met. We tend to gravitate towards what's in the world that's going to meet my need. We go there first because we're operating from our physical senses. And Jesus is having to bring us into a shift where we understand that which is of heaven, that which is of the Spirit, is far greater than that which is of the natural realm. And it's connected to a person, not to a physical well. I hope you're understanding what I'm saying here. So he describes this for her and how this is. And the woman says to him, with the whatever understanding she has at this moment, I mean, if you're her, you're thinking, well, this sounds like a good deal. Never thirst again. And so she says, well, sir, give me this water, so I will not be thirsty, nor will I have to come all the way down here to draw. Now, where's she thinking? She's thinking in the physical, isn't she? She's trying to grasp what he's saying, but she's still not getting it. So Jesus, being intentional in going after her heart, because he really wants her to get what he's after here. Can you see that there's a breakdown? There's a disconnect. She's coming. She's getting physical water. Jesus is engaging her. It is disrupting her life. She's in a very awkward position because she has a Jewish man asking her for water, and this is upending her life right now. What do I do? How do I respond to this? Would God upend your life to get your attention? Would he just break all the rules and all the normal in order to get us to think again about something? He has to. Otherwise, we would never get it. And so this woman is grappling with what is going on here. Why is he talking to me? What is this that's going on? And he's so, she's trying to be respectful. She's hearing him talking about this living water and never thirsting again. So she's saying, well, yeah, give me that water, because you said that you would give this to me. Well, give me that water, and I won't have to come down here anymore and draw. And so it's obvious there's a big disconnect. Now, what is the real reason for the disconnect? It's not that she just doesn't understand spiritual things. It's she doesn't understand how God sees her. Now, you consider who this woman is, because we're about to read here. Jesus is about to get to the real issue for her and why she cannot connect to the living water that God has for her. So he asks her, go get your husband. Bring him here so we can talk. I'm sure she was a little surprised, like, wait a minute, we're talking about living water. You're saying go get your husband? What are you after here? And so what's her response? The woman answered and said, I have no husband. And Jesus said to her, you have correctly said, I have no husband. For in fact, you've already had 5 husbands, and the man you're with now is not your husband. You have answered correctly. You told me the truth. You have no husband. Now her response is, Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Because what just happened? Jesus just read her mail. Jesus just revealed to her, I know a lot about you. I also know where your pain is. And that woman is realizing, he just set me up. Go get your husband. When he knew all along that I don't have one. He knew already that I didn't, that I have this history. Very interesting situation. Jesus, you already knew that I don't have a husband, and yet you asked me to get my husband because you're deliberately setting me up. You're taking me off my map. You're getting me off my normal grid. Now, how is she feeling at this point? I think she's potentially feeling extremely vulnerable. Like, he's a Jew and he's a man, and he's cornering me trying to get water, and now he's reading my mail. Now he's telling me all the shameful things about me that I've been trying to get away from. But see, at some point, what Jesus is waiting to have happen to this woman is that she's going to understand that though he knows all the things that have defined her identity. You see, it's not that she's this loose woman who just wants to change husbands every month. No, she's had 5 husbands because every man has rejected her and divorced her and said, you're not good enough. And set her aside. And then she gets remarried again, and every time she's, she needs a husband so that she can be cared for. And I imagine that every time she gets another husband, she's selling herself for whatever the man will take. And finally, after number 5, now she's with a man who just will take her for what he can get from her without the honor of marriage. How does this woman see herself? I'm a reject. I'm a loser. Nobody wants me. And I'm a Samaritan. When you're in the place where this woman is at and she's drawing water from Jacob's well, this well represents her only potential connection to God, her only hope. She's reaching back into some tradition, spiritual tradition of a story that she heard of a man named Jacob, and that somehow in her bloodline she is connected to this man Jacob who walked with God, but she herself is far away. And she's trying to find some hope for her life. But she has no way to undo the past and undo where she was born. And so she is just totally disconnected from God, period, except for this well. At least I drink from the well of Jacob. And it's such a picture for me of where we can find ourselves. Satan is so good at trying to waste our lives, at trying to get us to believe the very worst about ourselves, and where we're always running from some kind of identity of shame and failure and mistakes and where I was born, and we're clinging to some little thing about God that we have in our history somewhere. Maybe God will see me. Maybe God will answer my prayer. Maybe God will show up in my life. And here's the sad reality, is that you and I can be born again by the Spirit of God and still be in the same place as this woman. What is the real issue? Jesus defined it right in the beginning. He said, if you knew the gift of God, and if you knew the one who is speaking to you right now, everything would have already changed for you. You would have already come to me. You would have left this whole old identity and this lifestyle and clinging to this well. And you would have asked me to pour out something in you that would completely redefine your life. It would open up possibilities for you that you never thought were possible. You would have asked me, and I would have already said yes, and you would be a possessor of it right now. We wouldn't be having this conversation. You know, we have a lot of conversations with God that are not connected to true reality. We have a lot of conversations with God, and a lot of our prayers and our inner thoughts that are connected to old identities and old failures, and where we're clinging on to some spiritual notions of something, but there's not much hope there. And we really see ourselves as somehow I don't have the same access to God as somebody else. Or God could never see me as that valuable. But when I read these words that Jesus said to the woman, if you knew, which says very clearly that she didn't know. Jesus knew. You can be in the know about things that are true in heaven. If you knew the gift, that is an interesting phrase. If you knew the gift of God, that tells me God has gifts. That tells me God is a giver. That tells me that God is very generous, and there's something within him and with what he possesses that he actually wants to bestow upon us. And it's always in a greater measure than you and I have previously imagined. If you knew the gift of God. As I've been meditating on this week, I've been thinking about that every issue that I have in my life, every place where I find myself getting stuck and discouraged and struggling and grasping to try and pray through something, or I want to see something change, but I can feel that I'm anxious about something, I'm always not as aware of the gift of God that's available to me in the moment. If I knew the gift of God, and here's what becomes the game changer, is that in the midst of my feeling inadequate and disqualified, and I'm afraid, and I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to get my hope, and how is that breakthrough going to come? The breakthrough comes when I realize that I'm talking to God, that I'm talking to the Lord Jesus, who already paid the full price, the one who was the lamb slain before the foundation of the world, and he's sitting at my well. The place where I've been camping out trying to work it out, trying to figure out how I'm going to get my needs met. He's already at my well. And he's the one who's engaging me. The fact that I'm even talking to God at all is because God himself has moved into my life. He's coming to a well near you. He's invading my space where I think nobody else wants to come. He's coming into that part of my life that I see as rejected of men. He's coming into that place where my identity is one of failure and no hope. Where I don't deserve, I'm not qualified. Why would God do that for me? I'm a Samaritan. But that's where Jesus is showing up. Into that place in my life. But see, that's why I'm afraid, because I'm still connected to this place that I've been living in. This old identity and these thoughts that I have connected to that and the ideas that I have about how God sees me right now and how others see me and all of this stuff, it all speaks of disqualification. And that's why I'm afraid. Because I think I'm outside the reach of what others have. Somehow I'm outside of the covenant of God. He doesn't see me. I'm not near Jerusalem. I'm trying to make my worship happen over here where I'm at, but it's not working very well. And that's why the woman has a discussion with Jesus about where you worship. Well, you Jews say that we're supposed to worship on that, in Jerusalem, and our fathers say this mountain here. And I love what Jesus says to her. Woman, I tell you the truth. There is coming a time, and now is, where you're not going to worship in that place or this place. Your relationship with God is not going to be defined by where you have been and where you live geographically and all the things that men cling to for their security as to why God would favor them. Because God is looking for those who are connecting with him in their heart, right where they are. Those who are receiving the gift of God right where they are. And they offer up worship in spirit and in truth. I love the fact that no matter where I'm at in my life, no matter what situation, that you can hear God say, it's the voice of Jesus that will say to you, if you knew the gift and how great it is right now, there's a gift waiting from God where he's going to come and do for you what you can't do for yourself. He's going to give you what you cannot earn, but it's just from his heart for you because he loves you and you're valuable to him. If you knew the gift of God, if you knew the extent of the gift, and you knew the one who is giving it, you knew the one who is speaking to you right now, you knew the one who is invading your life right now to bring the gift from the Father. If you knew that, you would also know that the time has come. That there's coming a time in your future where everything's going to shift. And you're going to have an encounter with God that's going to completely redefine who you are and how you relate to God. I don't know if you're understanding what I'm saying. But I am just absolutely amazed with Jesus. I'm amazed at how he sets this woman up. Please understand that God has not given up on us. It doesn't matter how many times you've been married. It doesn't matter how many times you've been rejected. It doesn't matter what labels you've carried. Doesn't even matter how you see yourself. The only thing that matters is that Jesus is at your well, and he's asking questions. And he's pressing into your life with some uncomfortableness. And if you don't know what to do, that's good, because he does. And the Jesus that we need to embrace is the Jesus that already knows everything about us, the good and the bad. And he doesn't get pushed back by that. Even though we're Samaritans. And he's a Jew. And that's just an analogy. But he's still saying, I want to connect with you. There is something about your life that you carry, that you possess. You were born with purpose. You were born with value. God has not given up on you. And the fact that Jesus, would come and say, give me a drink. I want to drink from your cup. I want to share at the closest level life with you. And I'm not afraid that you're going to contaminate me or that you're going to diminish me. The fact that Jesus would press into our lives at that level is remarkable. And see, what the woman needed to do is she needed to just say, wow, I'm being set up. There's a gift being given right now. The one who's speaking to me, which he goes on to reveal. The woman says, well, I've heard about this Messiah that's coming. And when he comes, he's going to set everything back in place where it needs to be. He's going to make everything right. And this is the moment Jesus was waiting to get to. Woman, the one whom you're speaking about also happens to be the one you are talking to. I am he. And at that point, she drops everything and runs back into the city and basically tells everybody, I just talked to the Messiah. And he's the answer for all of us. Could it be that this man who just read my mail, who just set me up and asked me for a drink, who invaded my shame, invaded my poverty, and invaded all of my disqualification, and was not put off by what other people have been put off by? Is it possible that this is the one we've all been waiting for? And the whole city comes out to meet Jesus. And he spends 2 days in Samaria. And the whole place is flipped upside down. My prayer for us this morning is that God would give to us a revelation. That we would become accustomed to asking these two questions. That as I'm dealing with my stuff and I'm realizing that God is setting me up with some challenges here and he's invading my space, that I would stop and say, who is it that's talking to me? Who is this one that's speaking to me? And realize that any God thoughts that you're having at the moment are actually inadequate. If you knew the one who is speaking to you, and he's telling her, you don't really know who I am, and you don't really know why I'm here. You're about to. But if you could grasp who I am and why I'm here speaking to you, you would ask me for everything that you realize is available for you. You would ask me to give you the things of heaven, the things that come straight out of the heart of God for you that only he can do. You would ask me for that because you would expect me to give it. And I believe that many of our struggles have come because we are coming to an image of God that we have that is connected to some past judgments where we still don't know who it is that we're talking to. And we're not asking for the life-giving essence of God coming inside of me and doing heavenly things that are supernatural, that only He can do. We're not asking. Jesus said, if you had known, you would have already asked, and I would have already given. How many times when we come to the Lord and we intercede, we pray, that we actually see Him having already given it to us? I mean, is this not the God who said, before you ask, I will answer? Is it possible that everything that you and I need at this moment and are going to need in the future is already accomplished in heaven? That it has already been given? But the reason we're not accessing it is because we don't know the gift. We don't know what's already been given. We don't know and understand what's already set in heaven over our lives. And yet we've been blessed with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places, seated with Christ. Already done. We already possess it. If you knew the gift, and if you knew the one who's giving, you would have already asked and you'd already have it. I think that Jesus is describing for this woman a lifestyle of walking with heaven. That there's a way that this operates where we live knowing that we have already received all things. That everything that only God can do is already ours, already belongs to us, and we need to learn how to think differently. But part of it is I've got to get rid of my old identities and all my disqualifications and every judgment I've made against myself. I've got to come in. I've got to realize Jesus is at my well. He chose me. He's asking me for a drink. He's wanting relationship with me. And if you feel like you want to run, that's your old identity talking to you. That's your old shame talking. That's some old labels and messages. If Jesus is at my well, it's because not only does He know everything about my history, it's also because He knows everything about my future and where the Father wants to take me. And that's why He came. Jesus has come into the land of Samaria to meet with a Samaritan and to ask for a drink. And He's asking us, do you know the gift? Do you know the one who's speaking to you now? Well, I know what I want God to do, and I got some hopes, and I've been clinging to this well. And the Lord's saying, no, we're going to eclipse all of that. Because there's a time coming, and now is, where God is going to so completely rearrange the way you do business with heaven and where you understand who you are, that you yourself are going to become the very place that God occupies, the very place of worship. You're not going to be going to a well. You're going to be the well. What happens to a person who starts realizing the well is already here? It's already springing up. Everything that I need is already right here. It just springs up inside of me. As soon as I realize I'm thirsty, I just realize it's already here. I have the one. He's already in me now. And all the power and all the resource and all the blessing and everything I need, it's all been given inside of me. And I can just drink at any time. And I can release heaven on earth everywhere I go. And we have to learn how to think this way. The woman at the well, in her identity in that town, that woman, she's been married 5 times, and we've heard the stories from her husbands, she gained an entirely new identity within that town. She became known as the revivalist because she's the one who brought the whole town to meet Jesus. She became the beginning of the outpouring for an entire city in Samaria. Yeah. I got to know what the gift is. I got to know how great it is. And I've got to know this one that I do not fully know yet. I got to stop clinging to Jacob's well. And I got to go for it. What is at hand right now? Because God loves me. I was born for a reason. Wow. Okay, let's stand. Thank you, Lord.